because for a regular Sabbath, they didn't have what you'd really call a preparation day. There was another day involved that was for this. This preparation day is the day before the Passover. So Christ was crucified in the time span of the crucifixion of the Lamb, where the blood was applied to the doorpost, as we find talked about in Exodus and so on. So the preparation day they're talking about here is not just a normal preparation day. It is the preparation day before the Passover. And as you recall, when Christ was crucified, he was arrested on the preparation day. And everything that's involved in this crucifixion part is in relationship to the Passover event. So just remember that. Let me see if I can try to explain this a little better. From my understanding, with the Jewish people, when they're getting ready for the Sabbath, on Friday they will prepare enough food and things to see them through the Saturday Sabbath in order to not have to work or anything of this nature on the Sabbath. But what they did was not to the extent of the Passover Sabbath. And there were several Sabbaths in the Passover. If you'll study Exodus, you'll learn all about it. I'm not going to go into detail with this because you can read and understand as well as I can and see what those Sabbaths was and so on. But the next verse I want to share with you is kind of important that you need to remember. And when you read it for yourself, read it slowly and understand exactly what it's saying. Now let me read that verse again. Now the next day, that followed the day of preparation. As we know that the day of preparation was when Christ was crucified. The next day was a high feast day, which was a Sabbath. So this next day they're speaking of here is the Sabbath day. And it says, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate. And I'm not going into all of that, but it's, I will read it here in just a minute. And it said, this day was the Passover day. It was the high feast day. It was a Sabbath. Yet the chief priests and Pharisees violated this day because they did something that was not supposed to be done on the Sabbath. They left their place and went somewhere else. That was a no-no to start with. They also requested a work to be done. Now, they were not supposed to do any work themselves on the Sabbath, nor were they to tell anybody else to work on the Sabbath. Yet here they went to the scribes and the Pharisees, or the chief priests and the Pharisees, telling them to have somebody to go and roll a stone or to make it secure so nobody could go in there and steal the body. Well, let me share the verses there. Matthew 27, verse 63 through 66. Says, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again. Command therefore that the scepter be made sure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say unto the people, He is risen from the dead, so the last hour shall be worse than the first. Pilate said unto them, Ye have a watch, Go your way, make it as sure as you can. So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealed in the stone, and set in a watch. Now, okay, I'm going to go and read from Matthew again, chapter 28, verse 1 and 2. And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Solomon, had bought sweet spices that they may come and anoint him. Now, you've got to catch this. This is very important. Remember, Christ, according to the teachings of all these different denominations and things, Christ was crucified on Friday. He was in the grave on Saturday, and everybody rested on the Sabbath and kept the Sabbath holy and so on and so forth. And then Sunday they went to the tomb and found him arisen. Okay? But now you got to catch that. In the end of the Sabbath, in other words, the Sabbath day was over. Okay. Matthew 28:1. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. Now this tells you basically what to do. But then Mark 16:1 says, and when the Sabbath was past, okay, it's already over. The Sabbath is past. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Solomon, had bought spices. Now, when did they buy spices? If they rested the Sabbath. Because as you know, according to the teachings, Christ was crucified Friday at the ending of the day, whatever you want to call it, and was buried just before the Sabbath started. And Mary Magdalene and Mary of Jesus was there at the tomb at that point in time. And they left there in order to get home before the Sabbath started. And here again, and when the Sabbath was past, okay, the Sabbath is past. Mary, the mother of James and Solomon, had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. And very early in the morning of the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. Now, based upon the teachings that's been taught for so many years, there was no way from the time that Christ was crucified until the resurrection of Christ Sunday morning for them to have bought and prepared the spices that they took to the tomb with them to anoint Jesus. Luke 24, verse 1. Now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came unto the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they had prepared, and certain others with them. So you've got to read and understand that from the time that Christ was crucified by the traditional teachings of Friday, that there is no way in the world, that I know of anyway, that they could have made up, or they could have bought the spices and made up the ointment that they were going to take to the sepulchre after the Sabbath was over to anoint Jesus with it. Now, I want to go to the book of John for this next part. Okay, let me try to continue on here. Turn with me to John chapter 19. Now, what I shared with you before there was the event that occurred primarily with the crucifixion and the resurrection, and showed you the things that was involved the Sabbath, and so on, and tried to share with you where that the Sabbath that they were talking about so much there was actually the first day of Passover, which was a Sabbath, and I'll prove that to you here in just a little bit. But first, let's get into John and read what John has to say dealing with the period of time before the crucifixion and the crucifixion. John chapter 19. Then Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him, and the soldiers platted the crown of thorns, and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe, and said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they smote him with their hand. Pilate therefore went forth again, and said unto them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him. Then came Jesus forth, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said unto them, Behold the man. When the chief priests therefore and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said unto them, Take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid. And he went again unto the judgment hall, and said unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then said Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee, and have power to release thee? Jesus answered, Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the pavement, but in the Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover. Now you got that? It was the preparation of the Passover.